Hey friends, my name is Cal Ellerby. I am the Disciple Making Catalyst for NEWChurch, the church planting initiative of the Apostolic Church of Pentecost. We are going to, over the next few weeks, explore the stories of a number of people who have been walking together with us in the Living Like a Missionary Challenge. So, welcome. Let's get right to it. Greg, I just need you to tell me a little bit about yourself, your name, where you live, kids, ministry, whatever it is that you think that would be helpful to get us launched together.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so my name is Greg Coobs. I'm married to the woman of my dreams, who's right over there right now. And I know we have to, I know we have to say that, but it's true in my case.
Yeah.
She is the most optimistic, encouraging, and caring person I have ever met.
Yeah.
Um, and we have four kids. They're 13, 11, 9, and 7 this year. We live in Mississauga, Ontario, and we've been here for the past 14 years now. Um,
Where'd you
and
move from, Greg?
we were living at Jane and Finch in Toronto in an apartment,
Okay.
which, if you
Okay.
know Toronto, it's a rougher neighborhood. We
Okay.
planted a church there,
Nice.
and then God called us here. Um, but God's doing a new thing.
Yeah. So
We can
cool.
chat about that.
So I'm curious to know how you found out about living like a missionary.
I think it was through you, actually.
I'm
Yeah,
standing on
I
the
think it
street
was.
corner with my placard going, yeah.
No, no, how it happened was I mean at the start of last of this year, I left the role that I was in as an associate pastor, just with a sense that God was calling us into something new.
Mm.
No idea of what exactly that would look like, but somewhat of a frustration with the old and a desire to follow the Lord into the new thing that He had for us. I found myself at our biennial ACOP conference in May, going, man, I love the people that I know in this room. Like we have some incredible leaders that have poured into my life over the years, and I absolutely love these people. But with all the pastors in the room, and even though I've been a pastor for the last 17 years, I just feel like a fish out of water. I
Mm.
feel like I don't know, I don't fit, or like there's something different. And then being able to sit down with you, I don't know if that was the third day or the last day of the conference, and a couple people along the way, Chris Stevens had said, you should meet with Cal. Rod, you should talk with Cal. And just being able to sit down with you and have that chat was so helpful, and it just brought such a relief to where I was at, and gave me a real sense of like, okay, I'm not alone in this. And then I think you brought up the the course.
Greg, it's interesting that you talk about that. What would you call it? Like a holy discontent almost. Talk about that a little bit because it seems to me that there's a whole lot of people that are sensing that. I don't even, I don't want to be disparaging in any way to the local church. So I don't want to criticize, but there is a stirring. I don't know what you want to call it. There's a discontent. Just talk to me about what you are feeling and if you see that sort of around, your connections.
Yeah, I think personally, my heart has always been um, like since God got a hold of it on the mission field, has been for reaching the lost and making new disciples. And when I got involved in pastoral ministry, that was where my heart would always be. It would always be on the front lines outside the church, and with a real desire to train and equip the church to leave the building and to reach people. But I just found myself, and especially in this last season, really frustrated with how much of our time and our resources were inward focused. And that was my job was very much to help new people get integrated within the church. It was to be involved in leading outreaches and that sort of thing. But I just felt like I was busy in the work of the ministry, and so much of it was working with and relating to church people. And my heart was, man, I want to reach my neighbors. I'd been involved in Alpha, in leading a number of different Alpha groups, probably like five or six groups within the church. And the last one that I did in the fall of last year was finally out of my home instead of out of the church building. And we had 5 different homes from our street the first night represented in my living room.
Sweet.
And by the end of it, we had people in the group going, "This is kind of like church." And I was like, "Wow, like this is where my heart is."
Yeah.
And so for me, it was I guess just that frustration that of being so inward focused and feeling like, man, my heart is out there, and yet I'm stuck doing all this. And it's not like it's not important. It's not like caring for people and teaching and all those things are important, but it's just I felt like it was keeping me from prioritizing the mission.
So do you see that in other people at all? That unsettled sort of, how do we do this different?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like the lady that joined us on the call last night, her heart beats the same. Uh, Feeling like people that feel like, you know what, I'm sitting here on the sidelines, and so much of the focus is on the Sunday service or whenever the service is, and the person leading the meeting and the quote unquote expert. And there's a lot of people with a lot of gifts and a lot of relationships that are just coming and going,
Yeah.
and are unsettled in that.
Yeah.
And
Well,
going,
yeah.
there has to be something more. This is not the most effective way of me making disciples. Yeah.
It's interesting because, in my journey with this over the last few years, I've said to the Lord, like, God, who do we reach? Who do we invite to be on this journey with us? And where I've landed is, I call them the disconnected, people that have maybe had an experience with the Lord, but haven't been actively involved in the church or in anything for some time. So they haven't lost their love for Jesus. They just have kind of moved on from the routine kind of a thing. So we call them the disconnected. We're interested in reaching out and saying, you know what? God has called you to be a disciple maker, and there's a way to do that.
Yeah.
And we want to help you do that. And then there's what I call the board. In most of our churches, there's lots of people sitting in the pews that are there because that's what they do, but they don't necessarily feel like it's a meaningful, the biggest question that they have while they're sitting through an hour and a half of church is, where are we going to have lunch? They're just not, they're not engaged. They're not critical of them. I'm just saying that there is a sizable part of the body of Christ that unfortunately is in that position. And then there's just lost people. Who's in your network? Who you doing life with? So we have focused intentionally on trying to identify those pockets of people and invite them to walk in disciple making relationship. So let's talk about the process. And I don't know what word to use to call the missionary pathway other than a pathway. It's not a program. It's not a fill in the blanks. It's not a lecture. It's a pathway. How do we
Yeah.
become effective at living like missionaries? Um, so far, and you've been 1.5 times round the mountain here. Um, do you think that the structure is helpful? You think that the points that we focus on are helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it builds on itself from week to week, right? Beginning with prayer, desperate prayer and fasting. Um, the homework, yeah, there is homework, but it's totally manageable and it's really practical. And where I'm being challenged to do what's in my heart to do anyways. And now there's some accountability to actually do it,
Yeah.
you know? So yeah, I thought it was great.
One of the challenges is, and we've had some people drop off because they get intimidated by, the idea in their head that this is only for great women and men of God to, change the world. But have most of the people on the group just talk to me, don't name names, but are most of the people just normal people that are saying, you know what, the Lord could use me if I made myself available? You find that to be the case, or is it somewhat exclusive?
They're all weird like me, Cal.
Who are
No,
weird
yeah,
like me?
you're right. You're right. I mean, they're different in the sense that they're not comfortable with the status quo or just the old, and they're longing for something more, right? But ordinary like me, that's what we're going for. And there's a beauty in that. Like we're all coming from different cultures and backgrounds and places in Canada, which is fun. It's so fun. But um,
Which is
yeah,
really
the
cool,
hardest
isn't
is
it? It's across the
it
country.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that sense of like national unity. We're in this together, right?
Yeah.
Um, but ordinary people, anyone can do this. And
Yeah.
yeah, the material is very, very simple, very practical.
Yeah. So you didn't feel, I mean, you're a different cat because you've got experience of being in front of people, but do you think most people feel like, they're a player, not just a spectator?
Yeah, and well, and I really appreciate in that too that there that in the calls that I've been a part of, people that are somewhat shy or reserved, there's no pressure to have answers or to participate in all the conversation.
Yeah.
Um, there's an invitation to be there, but yeah, everybody is included. Everyone is involved in it. We're learning. We're in it together. None of us are experts here,
I
but
find it
yeah,
interesting that sometime, like last night, and I won't share the name, but they turned their camera off and muted themselves. And it's like, I want to be here, but I don't want anybody to ask me to do anything. And I'm like, hey, no problem. It'll come to a point where you just can't sit on what you're feeling any longer, and you'll unmute yourself and you'll turn your camera on. You'll say, you know what, this is what I think God's saying to me. That's what I love about that interaction, because there's such a diversity and such a blend of different backgrounds and perspectives that make it really enlightening. It's cool to hear the
yeah,
different views.
yeah. And we have so much to learn from each other, right? Because our
Yeah.
contexts are different and our gifts might be different. Um, it's really neat to hear how people are applying the material and to just get ideas and strategies from others. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, man, that's the main thing, is that we're here to grow together. We're here to learn from each other. And I just keep saying to people, I don't care about the course. I don't. And when it's 7 weeks is up, so what? This is This is a journey of learning together beyond, all the schedule and all that kind of stuff. We need to see a movement of disciple makers in our nation. And
Amen.
the whole point of this is to strengthen that, not only the conviction, but the call them skills, call them whatever you want, but the ability to be impactful and to be effective with the whole thing. So can you just talk about a couple of the things that have been helpful that you've taken out of the time together that have sort of maybe pushed your thinking an area ahead, or was new to you, or whatever it is? Just talk to me about a couple of the things that were favorite pieces for you.
Yeah. Probably first up was the session that we had on relational mapping and the Blessed Five. It's not as though I didn't know these things, but it was okay, now we're gonna actually walk this out. We're gonna do it, right? And what it did for me is it just brought a focus and an intentionality to what was already in my heart, right? Initially, like our heart goes out to our neighbors and we want to reach our neighbors. And this summer we had back in June, we had a street party where we had like over 50 of our neighbors like out on the street hanging out, having lunch together, and it was beautiful. But and that's my heart. It's like, Lord, let's reach them all. Like, let's go big, uh, and I felt like in prayer, God just saying, focus on the one or two, the few, right? And I think the relational mapping and the Blessed Five, it really helped me to just like hone in on these are the few that we sense like God putting on our heart to go after in prayer and to build connection with, and to be intentional about having them over for dinner and loving and serving and hanging out with these people, because these are the people that we want to see as new disciples. That was super helpful. And then there's an accountability in that too, right? It's not like I've got 60 homes on my street and I'm praying for this one week and that one the next week, and then I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm getting bored of it and I'm moving on back to like maybe an event-driven evangelism as opposed to a relational focused discipleship. you know um, that was really helpful. I think the other thing that's been helpful is implementing the Discovery Bible Study. I had heard of it, um, but hadn't really done it at all. And so to be able to practice that, not only with the group, but now with our family, as we prepare to implement it with our neighbors and have them at our dining table, is awesome. Like with our 4 kids, it's in this season of, hey guys, this is something that we're aiming to do with our neighbors. So let's get comfortable with it. Let's get used to it so that we're not, doing cartwheels on the table while we're trying to have a discussion about Jesus with our neighbors, right? But I mean, that's real life. But
Yeah, beautiful.
to be able to practice it has been really helpful.
Yeah, that's cool. Let me just go back to the people that you felt like the Lord put on our heart. So one of the
Mhm.
principles in the being intentional about praying and extraordinary prayer and fasting is the listening part of prayer, and the focus on actually hearing who God has identified and introduced as that person of peace or whatever. Just talk to me about, sort of what that has meant and what that means, not only for yourself, but for others, when we anticipate that, what, maybe God has gone ahead and done something here that we need to know about.
Yeah. Well, I think the way that God speaks to people is different. At times, He speaks their language, and for me, um, it's often a just a inner knowing, a still small voice in my heart. And as we look to put a list together of who's your five, I've got people on my heart right away where I'm like, I know that these are people
Right.
that God's called us to go after, and I can't help but do this. And then from there, it's just been a beginning to intentionally invite them for dinner, look to connect with them, and do things with them in order to build the relationship. It was interesting though, like the first two couples that we had over at our house that God had put on our heart. The and understand, like, we've been where we are for like 10 years now, right? In our neighborhood. We've built some relationship already. It's not like this is a one-off thing, first time meeting them. The first time that we had them intentionally at our dinner table, because we're like, these are our people.
Yeah.
Um, the conversation already led into, hey, we're looking to do church around our dining table. We're looking to to build relationship with our neighbors, and talk about Jesus and study the Bible together, and what that might look like. And it was so natural
Mm.
and not forced. And I felt like I was casting vision for what's to come, but it was
Yeah.
it was completely normal.
So cool. So I guess that leads me to another question is as far as the resource is concerned, and there's so much good stuff in all of that. I mean, we can't get to everything, but have you found it to be practical and workable in a applicable in a way that, it would sort of demystify the whole idea of being a disciple maker? Have you found the content and the resource to be helpful in equipping effectively that way?
Oh, 100%. It's it's incredibly practical and applicable. Um, and there's some really great tools that I'm picking up, that eventually will just become second nature, and I won't even think about it anymore. But right now in the season are tools that we're using and practicing, um, in order to develop more of a lifestyle of living like missionaries. And they're very simple, that you can easily go back to. Yeah, it's really, really great, really practical.
So here's the reality. We are in a time in our nation that desperately needs the gospel.
Yeah,
Our current strategy is not able to keep up. It just, even the most effective churches, I mean, we're falling behind population wise, if not other ways as well,
yeah.
far quicker than what our current strategies are able to, reach. So the heart of this is, how do we mobilize the body of Christ at the grassroots level? How do we create disciple makers? And my concern is this be perceived as, just another program, another evangelism explosion or whatever. I'm asking you to join me in the plea to invite men and women of conviction and faith and ordinary people to join us and and walk with us in this journey of discovery on how to become better prepared, better equipped to be disciple makers, like walking with others. So I'm asking you to help me make that plea as we try to get this in front of people and say, come, let us learn together.
Yeah. Well, I'm realizing in this whole thing, when you go the relational route, it's often slow. It takes so much longer, but it's real, it's life-changing, and it can, as it develops, multiply rapidly. Initially, it might not look like a whole lot, but I think the beauty of what I've experienced is not simply being able to go through the material itself. Like the material is great, but more than that, it's the community that's forming. It's
Yeah.
the network that's being established, right? Where um, there's a group of people that are coming together consistently to encourage one another in what's in our hearts and what God's called us to do, to really go after it, to learn from one another and to support one another in that. And that's been incredible. You know, I think my pitch um, to those that aren't yet involved is, like if you're at a place right now where your heart is to follow Jesus and living out the Great Commission in making disciples, and you find yourself right now frustrated with being cooped up or benched on the sidelines,
Mm.
or you look at your life and you're so busy, and we're all busy, right? And the majority of your time is spent focusing on people inside the church rather than those already in your life that God has placed there, and He's placed you in the midst of who don't yet know Jesus. Like this is a great group to encourage you and empower you and equip you to be able to be more effective
Yeah.
in making new disciples, which is what God has called us to do and is incredibly essential right now in our nation.
Yeah, that's awesome, Greg. Thanks for sharing your heart. One last question for you. Just tell me how it has not the material necessarily, but this journey, how has it changed your thinking?
Oh yeah, in many ways, and I think that's been the biggest thing for me is initially the realization of I got a lot of things I need to unlearn, and that's probably going to be the steepest climb. After I left my job as an associate pastor, I found myself, I was somewhat, disillusioned and definitely frustrated with my experience of church. What really helped me along the way is instead of focusing on all the things that I saw as wrong or unhealthy with the old, what initially helped me was just understanding that God had called us into something new, and really focusing on that, focusing on where the Spirit was leading and what He was doing in us, even though I had no idea of what exactly that was going to look like. But I struggled with just feeling like, okay, there's something new, but I don't know what it is, and I don't really have the words for it. I don't know how to explain it myself, let alone to talk to my parents or my family or my friends about what this new venture is that God has us on, right? And and on top of that, just realizing how much of my identity um and worth I'd placed in my role as a pastor, and suddenly I'm not. So who am I? You know,
Yeah.
what really helped me take the next step beyond just like God's called us to something new, and really what settled things in my heart was this idea that you introduced me to, and from the material as well, this idea of living like missionaries. And because I'd done missions before, uh, I already had that sense of this is what it could look like, or this is the kind of way in which we might think or approach things as missionaries. And not only was it helpful for me, but I think it was also really helpful in explaining it to family and friends who were like, "Are you okay?" You know, right? And it helped in so many ways, Cal. Like, um, just the idea of getting a job outside the church. I'm like, I got 2 degrees in religious studies. All I've done for a career is pastoral ministry. Now what? And that feeling of that struggle to like not compare um, myself to other people, or again, not try to find my worth in my career, the idea of living like a missionary. Then suddenly it makes sense for me to tent make, to
Mm.
work outside the church, where I'm building relationships and connections with people in the marketplace, right? Where there's a whole mission field out there. Um, and the idea of like this isn't an event, but it's a lifestyle. And so as much as we've got our 5 that we're, or 6 in our case, that we're praying for and really going after, uh, we're we're here for you, Lord. We're available, and wherever we go, we can be on mission together. It was helpful for my family, for my kids, because to turn from what we were doing to where we are now has been a huge shift. And it gave me language to be able to even talk to our kids about what was in our heart. That's been huge. I think also just how in the pathway they hammer home the point that prayer is the work, and it's not an add-on where we're asking God to bless the work that we're doing. It is the work, and it's the power that precedes the mission. And if I'm to prioritize anything, I'm a task-oriented person, and I'm like, let's do it, let's go for it. And prayer, oftentimes, it doesn't seem like necessarily the task to reach my neighbors, but it is the only way. It
Mm.
is. It's and Jesus, like I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but when Jesus says the harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few, his first thing is pray.
Yeah.
And I so easily get caught up in what's the plan, what's the strategy, how are we reaching? But to really prioritize that, to schedule it, to intentionally walk it out, and to make that the first thing and the primary work has been a real challenge and an encouragement um, through the material.
So cool, man. I mean, the reality is that we're all called to the field. The idea that has been instilled in the church that somehow the guy at the front on this 2 hour block of time is what it means to be in ministry. And if I can communicate to anybody anything, it's that we're called to live like missionaries inside of the context in which God has placed us. I
Yeah,
mean, there's a place to be called and sent to mission fields around the world and, you know, whatever. But one of my four epiphanies was what I refer to as the 5%ers, the highly gifted, uniquely called, to shift from being focused on we need a few more of them to what I felt like the Lord said to me was I didn't build my church on the 5%ers. I built it on the 95%, the
yeah,
ordinary person that goes to work every day, but change the way they think to see where they go to work as their mission field, and that they're a missionary to that field, and that there are principles that we can apply that are normal and natural and workable and allow us to partner with Jesus in the journey. That will change the world.
yeah, yeah. Come on. If we're
It's
just
so cool.
ordinary, then anyone can do this, and everyone should be doing this, right?
Absolutely.
Peter and John,
Greg,
ordinary, untrained.
absolutely. They
You can
appeared to
do
have
it.
been with Jesus. These uneducated, unskilled, normal fishermen, but it appears that they've been with Jesus. Greg, thanks, buddy. Blessings on you, and look forward to the journey going forward. Just as an invitation, if you're interested in participating in the next cohort of Living Like a Missionary, please contact me at cal@acop.ca. We'll give you the information as to when the new ones are going to be coming on board, and we'd love to see you equipped to be the vessel and vehicle that God has chosen to use within the context that He has placed you to change the lives of those who God is already touching. Blessings on you.